time. So if you didn't get how to do what happens when that perpetuity starts late, you will have to learn that by the next exam. That was the most missed question. The grades were very consistent with the last 10 to 15 years that this class has been taught. So the grades for this class don't change much. It doesn't really matter who's teaching it or what we do. The grades are just like very steady. So the distribution for this exam was like the breakdown between A's, B's, and C's and lower was very normal. And it was the median was actually higher. So normally on this test, students do a little bit worse, and there's more. The whole distribution is like maybe a question or two lower. So you all did very, very well. The next test is the harder one. I think that this upcoming test is the most difficult, and the reason is because it's going to be material you haven't seen before. There's a lot of new stuff. So everything we've covered so far, you may or may not have been exposed to in accounting in some kind of way. Once we go into this next part of the class, it's basically 90% new. There's a little bit in the body chapter you've seen before, but it's mostly new material. And students will struggle on the concepts. So make sure you're going to spend time on the concepts and vocab on this next step. We are going to pick up in your packet on page 15. So we're still in the part 2 packet. We're picking up on page 15 where we're talking about the coefficients of variation, which calculated all the homework. And now we're going into a discussion of interest rates. So any questions before I get started? Okay, let's get going then. So, I'm on page 15, right in the middle where it says risk and return of different assets. So the test will start from this point forward. It says risk and return of different assets. Okay, so let's think about risk. And let's think about different things that you might invest in. Since March Madness is coming up, and we're a big basketball household, let's think about basketball for a moment. So imagine I have a pool of money and I'm going to Las Vegas to bet on teams. And imagine it's the beginning of the season. So we're way back in like October, November. And I'm going to place a bet on whether or not certain teams are going to get into the tournament. So we're a big Arizona household. That's where we get our PhD. So imagine we really have this strong allegiance to the Arizona basketball team. So what are like some betting options that we have? What might we do?
Proposition bet.
We could do a prop bet, okay, and we could put all of our money on, like how would we do that bet?
You're going to get a negative odds, so you're going to have to place it, say, 500 bucks. For Arizona to make the tournament would be like risking 500 to make 20 bucks.
Perfect. Okay, so we could risk $500, put it all in Arizona to make money on the back end of that bet. So we could bet all of our money on Arizona. What else could we do? Imagine you have a whole bunch of money and you're in Vegas and you're in the whole little area for making bets on sports teams. They've got all the TVs going.
Parlays and teasers.
Okay, do I have to bet all of it on Arizona? No, I could bet it on who else? Split it? I could split my money between Arizona and Dallas. Oh, let's pick a college. I could bet on the Mavericks, but we don't watch that much pro, so let's pick a college. Okay, so let me say Arizona, U of A, basketball. Who else could I bet on? Tech, thank you. I could bet on Arizona and Tech. So we've done that sometimes. So sometimes we'll say, oh, let's put all our money on Arizona, or let's split it up and we'll bet on Arizona and Tech. When I bet on two teams, how is that different than when I just bet on one team? When I bet on Arizona, how many games am I going to watch? All the Arizona games, right? I'm going to watch them the whole season. I care about their injuries. When I bet on two teams, how many games am I watching? Enough for two. I have to watch both teams now all season. So now I'm Your seed, okay, so I'm going to care about where they go in the bracket, and during all of this season, what do I care about? Their strength of schedule. I care who they're playing. So when I bet on Arizona, I'm not just watching Arizona, U of A, but I'm also watching UCLA, USC. I'm watching the whole Pac-12 to figure out what their strength is, their strength of schedule inside the Pac-12. When I bet on Arizona and Tech, now I care not just about Arizona and Tech, but now I'm going to be watching lots of basketball because now I'm watching all the Pac-12 games to figure out their strength of schedule, and I'm going to be watching all the Big 12 games to figure out their strength of schedule so that I can figure out how good Arizona and Tech are relative to the other teams in the conference. What else am I going to care about? I'm going to care about any game where they play each other or where they play out of conference, so that I can keep track of how they're interacting. So if Arizona beats UCLA and UCLA plays Kansas and Kansas plays Tech, I'm going to care about that whole little chain of relationships that I've created. And this is how people fill out their bracket, right? They go, oh, they beat them and they looked bad against this game and this team looked terrible against this team, or they looked good here. And you care about not just the team, but everyone in their conference that they beat, and everyone that those teams played out of conference to determine how good that team is. The whole goal here is to figure out how good the team is and how risky they are in the bracket. We are going to take all of the mental muscles that you use in your brain and you think about how good a team is relative to other teams. That's the concept of risk and diversification. All of those same tools you use in your head when you're thinking about a basketball team is exactly what you would use for a stock. So when I invest in Tesla, I don't just care about Tesla. I care about what's going on there. I care about the industry. How are they performing relative to their peers? I care about any relationship a firm in the industry has outside of the industry. What does their supply chain that takes them outside of the industry look like? And then I care about how the stock prices relate to one another outside of the industry. So there's going to be a lot of this feeling of like, this is getting like very big picture-y, and that's how this chapter goes. So when we think about risk, we're going to look like very big picture. I'm not going to give you all the financial theory behind what we're going to find. We're going to think very like large picture. Think back to this basketball example. So let's think about something long-term or something short-term. So what do you think is riskier? Something long-term from the U.S. government or something short-term from the U.S. government? Long-term. Which one's riskier? Which one has a greater chance of something bad happening and losing your money? Long-term. The long-term is riskier because there's a longer opportunity for me to lose my money. If I bet on a basketball team now, the season's almost over. So my risk is not as great. If I bet on Arizona back in November, we had the whole season of bad stuff that could happen, and so the risk is much higher. So if you have a long-term investment, it will always be riskier than the equivalent short-term investment. Because in 6 months, what could really happen? In 5 years, wow, a lot of bad stuff could happen during that time. So long-term is riskier. What about between stocks? What's riskier, high tech or utilities? High tech is riskier. They have a lot more going on inside of high tech. Every single firm inside of high tech is going to be very risky. As an industry, it's very risky. So that's going to be riskier. So we're going to see that there's different levels of risk across the economy. So we're going to talk really quickly and do a detour. This is a detour into chapter 6 about interest rates, because this is going to show you how risk stacks on top of each other. Okay, so this is the stacking of risk. So R stands for rate. In this case, the R is the required rate of return. So this is what you are wanting on your investment. So the R on this side of the equation is what an investor wants. It's what they're thinking they're going to get. It's what they want to get. If I don't get this, I'm not even going to invest my money. So that's the required return. It's what the investor wants. This is for a debt. So this is for a type of debt. We're going to see for stocks this works a little differently. So for a type of debt, we're going to start with the risk-free rate. That's our benchmark. It's our basic building block that all of our investments grow upon. So we're starting with this little R star. This is the risk-free rate. I better at least get that. The risk-free rate, what do we use for the risk-free rate in this class? U.S. Treasuries. Good. Yep. So we use U.S. Treasuries as our basic building block for all financial investments. This is our starting point because I could just take my money and go invest in U.S. Treasuries, so I better at least get U.S. Treasuries. On top of my U.S. Treasuries real interest rate, I have a bit of inflation. So this is getting stacked on top. And I get an interest rate from the fact that there's inflation stuff that happens. Okay, so if I start with my real risk-free rate, I can stack inflation on top. Any financial investment I make should at least get me my benchmark and should at least keep up with inflation. That's what it's saying. So I'm at least getting risk-free. I'm at least keeping up with inflation. The next three, D, L, and M, are based on the level of risk of a specific security. So D is how likely is this firm to default? If the firm is likely to default, the DRP, the risk premium, is very high. It adds a very big building block on top. Okay, so now investors want at least the risk-free, they want at least to keep up with inflation, and if it's very risky company, they want a lot to invest in this company that's probably going to go bankrupt. So the concept is because this is debt, I don't want to loan to somebody who's not going to pay me back. Okay, so if it looks like they're risky, and they're probably going to go bankrupt, I better get a lot as an investor. You better pay those investors a lot to get them to invest in that company. So that's default is based on how likely they are to go bankrupt. The next one, L, is the liquidity premium. For bonds, this is pretty small because most bonds are not liquid, but this is based on how easy is it to trade. If it's really easy to trade, investors are not going to be worried. They're not going to say, oh, you have to give me extra. If it's really hard to trade, an investor would say, I require an extra rate of return. It's going to bump up that rate in order to invest in this thing. So the more illiquid or the more not liquid it is, the higher the liquidity premium. And the last one is the maturity risk premium. I'm going to write this down in a second. The maturity risk premium says the longer the maturity, the more an investor requires. So let's run through this and I'll write down the relationships on the paper because this is a test question after all. illiquidity, so that's not liquidity, is higher premium. And then for the last one, longer maturity is higher premium. This is going to make our math that we're doing today interesting. Okay, so I'm going to write on the board, sorry people if you're at home, the document camera's not working. I'm going to build basic building blocks. So my required return that an investor is expecting to invest in the stock. This is a rate, a percentage. It literally just stacks on top of each other. So this is the risk-free rate. Let's imagine I have something that's relatively safe. Let's say it's a short-term treasury. I would add the inflation premium. I at least keep up with risk-free rate. I at least keep up with inflation premium. And then for a short-term treasury, that's it. Okay, so this is my short-term treasury. Let's imagine I have a company like Sears. I'm going to have my R, risk-free rate. I'm going to keep up with inflation. They have a high default risk premium. This is this extra amount investors want in order to invest in something risky. So Sears is going bankrupt. They have a really high default risk premium. Their bonds are not liquid. So they have a really high liquidity premium. In any bond that was right before they went bankrupt, they issued a bunch of long-term bonds, and so they had this huge maturity risk premium. And so that Sears bonds, Sears debt, for an investor, if they follow through, will pay a whole lot because it's very risky, so it pays off a lot. Debt for a treasury is not very risky, and so it doesn't pay very much. So the risk stacks the return on top of itself. So in your group, you're going to go through these 4 types of securities, and what I want you to do is, bless you, check a box across the column. So you'll start with short-term treasury. That's the first one, and you'll check short-term treasury has the inflation premium. So I'm just going to put a little X right there. Okay, and then you'll go down the 4 rows. Ready to go. So I'm going to put an X right here because short-term treasury has inflation premium and it doesn't have anything else. So you're going to put an X in the box that goes with each of these 4, one by one, these 4 securities. What premiums do you think matter for those 4 securities? So find a friend and figure out what risk premiums matter. If you get a long-term loan, 20 or 30-year loan, the bank will be worried about your maturity risk, and this gets stacked back on, and your interest rate will, in the long run, over the whole life of the loan, you will end up paying more in interest. Okay, so that's that, this is true for us. Okay, so now what we're going to do, that's the end of our due to run interest rates. So that's all we're going to pull out. There's a test question that gives you a short-term corporate security, and it'll say what risk premiums are relevant for this security. Or it'll give you a U.S. Treasury and say what risk premiums are relevant for this security. So it just kind of asks you exactly what you did in the table. That's a test question, I promise it. Okay, portfolio construction. So that's the end of interest rates. So now we're going to go to thinking about how do these pieces fit together. So we're going to think about not just betting on one stock, not just betting on one team, not just investing all of our money in one place, but spreading it out. So thinking about the return, you're going to like part of this. The return is easy. Calculating the expected return for the portfolio is not bad at all. It's not that hard of math. Calculating the standard deviation is very difficult. And the more assets you add, the more difficult it becomes. And the reason is because I care not just about the risk of my bet, my stock, but I care about how that thing is interacting with all of the other pieces. So in our standard deviation measure, we actually capture the interaction of the stocks. So we're capturing that who played who and how did they do concept in the standard deviation. That makes that calculation very difficult. So we're probably not going to do that. So here's how we're going to do some portfolio math. Let's consider cutting our money in half. So let's imagine we have $100,000. We're going to cut our money in half in high tech and collections. Okay, so if you remember, I'm going to write on here. So recall that the expected return for high tech was 9.9%, and for collections, it was 1.2%. So this is coming from the old math that we did last week. There. Okay, so for high tech, the expected return was 9.9, and for collections, it was 1.2. So anytime, whether it's expected return or any type of calculation, when we have a portfolio, what you're going to do is find the weight of each piece. So the weight of stock A times the expected return of stock A plus the weight of stock B times the expected return of stock B. All of our portfolio math follows the same idea. The weight of stock A times the beta of A, the weight of stock B times the beta of B, the weight of stock A times the return of stock A, the weight of stock B times the return of stock B. Our math follows this similar concept of figuring out how much is in A, multiply by A's characteristic, how much is in B, multiply by B's characteristic, and then figure out for the portfolio. So this is the percent in A, and this is, in each of these cases, A's characteristic, whatever it is. The return, the risk, the beta, whatever. That stock, here's that characteristic. Then you do the same thing, the percent in B times the characteristic of B. And when I do that, it tells me, here's overall what the portfolio looks like. Okay, so percent of A times A, percent of B times B tells me overall what the security looks like. How do I find those percentages that are invested in each piece? It's the dollars invested in that piece, and let's say A, divided by the total dollars invested in the portfolio. So I take in my numerator the amount that I invest in that piece, and I divide in the denominator the total amount I have invested, and that tells me what my weights are, my percentage breakdown. So for example, let's imagine we have a portfolio with $100,000, and we cut it in half. So I have a portfolio with 100,000, I cut it in half, 50,000 and 50,000. So my weights are 0.5 and 0.5. It's 50,000 divided by 2. Okay, so you multiply it by the characteristic, and that gives you the expected return for that portfolio. So let's do this. So I want you to practice what this feels like. So here's the table of high tech and collections. Here's the recession below average, average above average. So here's the probabilities. I just want you to practice, what does this portfolio look like in each of these scenarios? So if we're average, and I have half of my dollars here and half of my dollars here, what does this portfolio look like? So I've given you the answers, but I want you to run through and make sure you can derive these. You're going to take the weight times high tech plus the weight times the collections and see and derive this answer for the portfolio. And remember, the weight is how much you have invested in each piece. Okay, so find a friend. You're going to practice this 5 times. What does this portfolio pay off in each of these scenarios? Ready, set, go. doing it on the fourth. Okay, so, we really needed the document camera today, of all days. Okay, here's what we're doing. We're saying you have $50,000 invested in each piece. So let's first figure out, I have $50,000 in each piece. So I have $100,000 total, because I have $50,000 in each piece. So my weight for stock A is 0.5. That's how much, what percentage of my money I have invested in that stock. So my weight for stock B, I have $50,000. I have $100,000 total in my portfolio. So it's also 0.5. So what we want to figure out is what happens with my portfolio in the different scenarios. I don't care about the probabilities. I just want to know, how does my portfolio perform? So imagine you have money, like you're Eric and I. We have invested in different stocks, and we will think like, okay, if there was a recession, how much would we lose on our money? Like that kind of will go through your mind. Once you have invested and you have a portfolio and you have your retirement, you'll think like, okay, if the U.S. economy is doing well, how much are we probably going to make this year? If the U.S. economy is doing poorly, how much are we probably going to lose this year? And those thoughts kind of go through your mind. That's what this is going to do. It says, okay, half of my money is invested in this stock, high tech. So half of my money is going to lose. Half of my money is going to gain. So overall, if there was a recession, I would lose, but not that much. And that's what we think of. Okay, we have money in, let's say, Tesla and Walmart. If we have a lot of money in Tesla and there's a recession, we're probably going to lose on that stock. If we have a lot of money in Walmart and there's a recession, Walmart is fairly recession-proof, so we'll lose, but just by a little bit. So we'll think, okay, hopefully the loss on Tesla will be bad, but the loss on Walmart won't be that bad, and so overall we'll probably be okay. That's exactly what this is doing. Saying, okay, we're going to lose here, but we're going to gain here, so overall, how do we look? Are we going to be okay in a recession? And then you're going to do the same thing for the next one. Half of the time, if it's below average, I lose, but the other half of my money gains. So overall, I actually made money that year. So even though the economy was below average, I made money on this investment strategy that year. Okay, so on the test, what I'll give you is a portfolio, and then I'll say, what is the payoff of this portfolio in this state? And I'll say, what is the payoff of this portfolio when the economy is average? Or what is the payoff of this portfolio when the economy is in a recession? And I'm asking for, how does this portfolio do in that state? Okay, so you would find the weight of each piece. You would multiply it by how that stock is doing in that scenario, and then that tells you how the portfolio did overall. Does that make sense?
So you'll just give us one, like you'll just ask.
I'll give you a table and ask for one of the lines.
Okay.
And I'll say, here's a scenario to give it away, win, lose, or tie. And I'll say, how much does the portfolio pay in a win? Or how much does the portfolio pay in a tie? And so it'll say, this stock pays this much in a win, this stock pays this much in a tie, so how does the portfolio do? So all you're doing is calculating math across that line there. Okay, so why do we need to be able to do this? We want to know how our money does on average. On average, did I make money this year? On average, did I not make money this year? But look at these two lines here. So when high tech is low, collections is really doing well. And when collections is doing poorly, high tech is doing well. So if we look at the portfolio payoff, how they do as a group, this actually is less cluster together. So it looks like the risk of the portfolio is actually smaller. There's less dispersion in the possible outcomes. Why do you think that happened? Why is there less dispersion in the possible outcomes of the portfolio? Like there's less good stuff and less bad stuff happening. How come?
Because it's more diversified and it's a very risky investment and less risky investment.
Okay, so we've diversified by offsetting. Like this looks like a hedge. We perfectly offset what's happening. When one's good, the other's bad. When one's bad, the other's good. And this offset has reduced the overall risk for our portfolio. So the risk for the portfolio is very low. The dispersion is very low, much lower than either of those two. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that if we group stuff together, we can actually get less risk. If we group stuff together, we can actually get less risk than the pieces by themselves. So that is our first principle. It's that first line. It's the first thing on page 17. It says the portfolio standard deviation, the portfolio risk, is lower than the risk of either of those things by themselves. So that's our first key principle, that the portfolio risk can be lower than the risk of the individual pieces by themselves. Somehow, when I group them together, it's less risky than if I just invest in one by itself. Somehow when I create a group of it, it's less risky. This is called diversification, which you just said. So which will have a higher risk? Something by itself or something in a group? The answer is something by itself will have a higher risk than something that is that same thing that is put into a group. So if we have a portfolio or a group of stuff, it will naturally have less risk than any single one of those items by themselves. That's called diversification. So diversification works because there's this offsetting of losses and gains. Instead of investing all my money in Arizona, I invest in Arizona in different teams. I split my money up and bet all over the place. And so there's offsetting gains and losses so that overall my strategy is less risky. Okay, so your key concept on this slide is the last bullet point. It's the definition of diversification, which is a bold word in your notes. The goal here is to reduce risk. That's the part we want to underline. We want to reduce risk. And we do that by spreading out our money. So instead of betting on one team, I bet on a bunch of teams. And then all of the gains and losses offset each other so that overall I'm not winning as much, but I'm not losing as much either. There's this kind of overall less risk in that strategy. This is where the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket, that is this. Diversification is the opposite of putting all your eggs in one basket. It's where you put your eggs in lots of baskets, and then you see how your investment strategy does. So the whole reason that this works is because of this concept called correlation. And don't look at your notes. Do you remember correlation from statistics? What does it mean? Okay, it has something to do with a pattern. Think back in your head, think back, pull it way out of long-term storage. What was correlation? Maybe you already dumped it. Okay, we have to have two things to find correlation. That's right. So we have to have two things, and it's how these two things connect. Yes, it's how they're related. Okay, so it's whether or not they move together. It's not if they both are making money. It's their co-movement. So correlation tells me their co-movement together. This is, and I know you learned this, and you're supposed to learn it in your business math class. So there's three types, basically, of correlation. So it can be negative. The the lowest it can go is -1. You do not have something less than -1. It is bound below by -1. This means that they move in opposite. So negative means opposite. It means when one goes up, the other goes down. When one goes down, the other goes up. They offset. Okay, so negative means they go in opposite directions. Positive means they move in the same direction. It doesn't mean that they make money. They could both be moving downward, and that would also be a positive correlation. So this has nothing to do with are they making money or not. It's just do they move in the same direction together. So positive means they're either moving up together or down together. Negative does not mean that they're both losing money. It means that they just move in opposite directions. If we want to diversify, we want to spread our money out, we get the most benefit of doing that if we pick things that are not strongly correlated, if we pick things that go towards the negative side. So if I'm spreading my money out, and I pick two things that are positively correlated, let's pick Google and Amazon. Google and Amazon tend to move in the same direction. They tend to move up together, and if you look in the past, they tend to move down together. Google and Amazon are positively correlated, so if I hold both of those, they're both in high tech. I'm not really diversifying my money. I pick two stocks that are kind of similar. But what if I pick Google and Home Depot? Are Google and Home Depot similar? They don't feel very similar, do they? They feel like Google's a tech stock, Home Depot is something else. Home Depot's going to do well when people are renovating. Google might do well based on other reasons, so they probably have less correlation. That's where you get the diversification benefit, when you pick things that don't move together. So the closer to one, the closer to positive one we go, the less diversifying is good, but it doesn't help us as much. The more the stocks begin to move in different directions, the more we get that benefit. So the positive is like investing, or like betting all of my money in the same conference, and the negative is like spreading my money out among different conferences. Okay, so this is a key concept. This basically exact sentence will be on your test. Something like, the lower the correlation, the greater diversification benefit, or the higher the correlation, the less diversification benefit. Okay, so we care about that movement together. It does nothing to do with they're making money or losing money. It has nothing to do with profit. It has nothing to do with this is a stock that won or lost. It literally is just do they move together or do they move apart? And if they move apart, that's where diversification is going to be the best strategy.
So if you have a perfect negative correlation, then you have like a max hedge.
Perfect max hedge, yes. They perfectly offset each other. That doesn't typically exist. You would have to find a stock like the collections that moves against the U.S. economy.
You're going to see a lower, significantly lower average return on investment. Right?
Low, yes. On average, you might as well just not invest at all. Yeah, you've hedged away your money. Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm wondering, like, why would you do that? Because you're technically betting against yourself.
That's a good question. Why would you bet against yourself? So why would you diversify all your money and basically create a way that you're not making money? You're betting against your own self. So you would do this if you care about risk. If all I care about is making money, then I would just put all of my money in one stock and take a bunch of risk and make a bunch of money. But if what I care about is not losing my money, then I'm going to spread it out. You will notice this once you create your retirement portfolio. You will suddenly be worried about, like if you have a 401k, oh my gosh, I don't want to put all of my 401k in Apple. That will feel very scary. You will not do that. What you'll do is say, okay, I have this 401k, I want to make money, but I want to do it safely. So let me spread it out a little bit in order to feel you're reducing your risk by spreading it find that you will not want to, you'll have this like hesitancy to take all of your eggs and stick them in one basket. You just, like, you can't press the button to make yourself do it. You will want to spread them out and reduce that risk a bit. Okay, so you see this a lot because people don't want to lose their money and they want to feel somewhat insulated from what's going on. So the reason that we care about this is because we have this financial theory that is going to be the groundwork for how we value stocks. So when we go and we value stocks, this is all based on a big financial theory that's been created. And a framework of this theory is that when we diversify, we can approach this maximum diversification concept. So imagine I have one stock, and I have Tesla, and then I add Apple, and then I add Home Depot, I add Walmart, I add Chipotle, I add GE, I add some utilities. The more stocks I add, the more diversification benefit there is. Imagine if I invested a little bit in every single stock. So what would that look like? So the concept is, if I start with just one stock, here this is one stock, I put all my eggs in one basket, that's very, very risky. And that's why it's way up high. So it's very risky to put all your money in one stock. Now let me cut my money in half. That feels safer, so my risk goes down. It's safer to cut my money. Let me cut my money now in 10 pieces. That feels safer, and so the risk goes down. So the more I chop this money up and spread it across my stocks, the more the risk goes down. And the risk goes down in this picture the more stocks I add until I have spread my money out over all of the stocks. And then once I do that, what do I care about? I'm still invested in US stocks, so what do I care about? Okay, so I still care about the US economy, which is going to go up and down. So even if you spread all your money out and you perfectly diversify, you still have this residual risk because you're invested in US stocks. And that is the light blue piece, this light blue chunk, is this residual risk that just comes no matter how I spread my money out. I'm still in the US, I still am investing in stocks, I still have some chance I'm going to lose all my money. That risk, that big risk, has a name. It is called market risk. So when we look at this picture, part of the risk we can get rid of. Part of the risk, the dark blue, we can get rid of that when we add stocks. Part of the risk, there's nothing we can do, we cannot get rid of it. So every stock has risk, and every risk can be cut in half. Part of it is called diversifiable risk. That's the piece we can get rid of. So this is the risk of that stock that is specific to that stock. We can diversify that part away. So we don't have to be worried about the risk of that piece because we can just add a bunch of stocks to our portfolio and then I can diversify that risk away and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So this is the risk that I don't have to worry about. I can diversify it away. It has two other names. It's also called firm-specific or idiosyncratic risk. So you need to know all three names. Diversifiable, firm-specific, idiosyncratic. My preference is to use the phrase firm-specific. Okay, so I use firm-specific. That's when I'm talking about this risk. It's for a particular firm, and it's that dark blue piece that we can actually manage. We can manage this risk by adding stocks to our portfolio. The second piece of risk in every single stock is a piece I cannot get rid of. It is just there. And it's there because the US economy does stuff, the global economy does stuff, and how much of this stock can I not manage away? There's nothing I can do about it. So beta is going to tell me for this stock, what does this piece look like that I cannot manage away? I'm not so worried about the top piece because if I do my portfolio right, I can get rid of it, right? I don't care about the risk of Apple itself because if I structure my portfolio correctly, I can diversify that away and I don't have to worry about it. What I care about is this piece that nothing I can do, I can get rid of it. I'm stuck with it. That's the piece I'm really caring about. So, what does that mean? Why do we even have this piece, this market risk piece? We have it because the U.S. economy moves. We have macroeconomic events that happen. It moves. The U.S. economy is so, the stock market is so particular. It moves on different days of the week. So certain days of the week in the U.S. stock market are better than other days of the week. It moves certain times of the year. For example, the stock market is very active and high in December and very low and quiet in January. So it moves based on time of the year. It moves based on day of the week. It moves based on boom or recession. It moves based on whether or not the president is a Republican or a Democrat. It moves based on whether or not we are at war or peace, whether or not we passed a banking regulation or not. All of these very nationwide things affect the stock market, and each stock has a chunk that you cannot get rid of, that you cannot manage away, that's caused by all of this stuff. Okay, so all of this stuff causes each stock to have a piece that you cannot diversify away. And it is called beta. And this is where we needed to get today, and we made it. Beta is this great measure that does exactly what's in bold, and what's in bold on your notes, so it must be important. Beta is its own question on the test, because it's that important. And what you need to know is, when do I have a stock that has a big chunk of systematic risk, and when do I have a stock that has a little chunk of systematic risk? That's what I care about. I want to know, is this a stock that moves a lot with the economy, or is this a stock that it does not have a big chunk that I have to get rid of? I can't get rid of. So, beta is based on the number 1. That is its middle point. It's kind of normal. Okay, so beta of 1 represents that the stock is exactly the same as the average stock in the market. So 1 means this stock is normal or average. If it's bigger than 1 means this stock is more sensitive, more dramatic, has a bigger chunk of systematic risk. So bigger than 1 means it's got a lot of systematic risk exposure. When the U.S. economy moves, this stock moves a lot. When the U.S. economy is stable, this stock is very stable. It very much follows those macroeconomic news events. So bigger than 1 means very much systematic risk, big chunk in there. It moves with the U.S. economy. It's very risky. Yeah.
So it's more than average?
More than average. More than the average stock. This is a very dramatic stock. It's going to do what the market does. More than average. If the beta is less than 1, this stock has less risk than average. It doesn't move much. It's very stable. If the U.S. economy crashes and the beta is less than 1, this stock will not move as much as the others. It's a relatively stable, steady, it's kind of insulated from what's going on in the rest of the market. So beta less than 1, the security is less the security is less risky than average. It's less risky than the average stock. It means that it's not as sensitive to what's going on. It doesn't care who's president. It doesn't care if we're in a recession. It doesn't care if what day of the week it is. It just doesn't really care. So can you think of a stock that would have a really low beta, very stable, not very sensitive to what's going on in the market? Something that doesn't mind what's happening in the economy. Something that you use always, regardless if we're in a boom or not. Huh?
Alcohol typically has a low beta.
He would know. Not because okay, anyway. Okay, sorry, Robert. So things that have a low beta are going to be things. Alcohol actually sometimes will move inverse to the market because when the market is really low and bad, then people will drink more alcohol. On the other hand, when the market's doing well, people can afford more alcohol. So alcohol has a relatively low beta, yes. Another example is an electricity company. It doesn't matter if we're in a recession or a boom or what day of the week or what season, we're all going to be using electricity in a very regular pattern. So electric is very, very low beta. Utilities will have very low beta. Water will have a very low beta. So these utility companies that we use regardless will have a low beta. Okay? What about something with a high beta? Very sensitive to the U.S. economy. High tech is going to be very sensitive. Retail, luxury brands are going to be very high beta. They're going to be very sensitive. And this is the piece that we can't get rid of. It doesn't matter how much I diversify, I cannot diversify away this exposure that this stock has to the U.S. economy. So this is going to give us a fancy equation, and this is what we're going to pick up next week. We are going to use this equation in all, not next week, Thursday. We're going to use this equation in all of chapter